All right, good day and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Live the Fuel show. So today we're bringing on once again, another new guest co-host for you. But this time, this gentleman's coming from another time zone. So let me catch you up on who this gentleman is. So after starting his career in the Army, realizing he was a lover rather than a fighter, he took a U-turn into a brand management. So I'm already vibing on this. I'm a fellow branding guy. Before he immersed himself, though, into the world of innovation and leadership development. Chris's leadership consultancy, Upping Your Elvis, is inspired by musician and philanthropist Bono's signature question, who's Elvis around here? Meaning, who's the guy that makes things happen? So the Upping Your Elvis mantra is driven by the belief that everyone has a bit of Elvis inside of them. By unleashing this innate human genius, the planet will be a more engaged and fulfilling place for everybody. This guy has spoken at TEDx. He's an Inspirational Ideas Festival, the Do Lectures, and the world's largest leadership event, Leadercast. I'm a follower of this, so I'm very impressed. Where he has also had the honor of interviewing Apple's co-founder, Steve Wozniak, live on stage. He's got a much bigger bio, but I want to get into all this as we always do on this show, where you're just getting to know each of us more and more every single day. So without further ado, welcome to the show, our latest co-host, Chris Barez-Brown, sir.
Howdy, Scott. Great to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you on. And to catch our listeners up, you are a few hours ahead, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. So where are we now? It's just 1:30 coming up.
Okay, yeah, and it's currently after 8 a.m. approaching 8:30 here on the East Coast of the U.S. So for our listeners, yes, we are speaking into the future.
Yeah, so we're here at the moment in deepest, darkest Dorset. So I'm looking out at the sea out there, and I've got to say it's looking quite wintry where I am.
Well, I was going to say, I know here, and part of the translation, but it was yesterday I woke up, it was 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which somewhere around negative 12 Celsius, something like that. I forget. So
it's chilly.
It's chilly. How's it on your side?
Yeah, it's not too bad. There was a bit of a frost this morning, but I've just come back from 3 weeks in Costa Rica, so it's still it's a bit of a shock.
The transition, yes. You were there for multiple weeks. That makes it even worse. So your body had already had a chance to start adapting.
Absolutely. I started to believe I lived there. That was the problem.
So what took you down there?
It was vacation. It was a bit of Christmas time.
Oh, you did the holiday down there.
Yeah, I've kind of had enough of the traditional Christmas. So I love spending time together with family. I love having some time to just kind of kick back and think. But over here, the weather's not so great, so people tend to eat, drink, and do very little else. And therefore, one year we do here, so the kids can do all the kind of the traditional stuff, and then 1 year we go away. And this year, Costa Rica won, and it won our hearts. What an amazing place.
So is that your first time there?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was great.
Okay, so every friend and colleague that I hear once goes there, they've all agreed. Now, did you guys learn to surf and stuff while you were there? Because I heard it's one of the best places to learn to surf at.
I'd say it was my top 3 surf spots ever. So yeah, very good, very good.
Oh, so this is not your first surfing rodeo. You've done this. Okay.
No, it's not. No, I've been out a few times. Yeah. Getting out on the sea is a big passion.
Well, and again, it sounds like you live right along. So what water is right next to you again?
I'm just looking at the English Channel right now.
Okay.
It's kind of grey. It's about the same colour as the sky right now, so you can't see it too well. And it's pretty choppy. But yeah, not great surf out here. But good sailing, good paddleboarding, great fishing.
Okay. All right. Well, so I was digging more into your bio, and just to dig in real quick. So you schooled over here in the States as well?
Yeah, I spent a year at Iowa State.
Okay. So what brought you over here?
Well, basically, I was looking at the degree options, and I wanted to do a fancy business degree, and then I found one where 1 year was in the States, and I was like, well, why wouldn't you do that? So I studied at Iowa State. The university that I was at over here, which was University College Swansea, I think it had something like, it was the 5 little marketing courses. Iowa State had 27 just in advertising. So the whole scale of it blew my mind. I was making nationwide PSAs that would run. The opportunities were incredible, and I got to run an amazing blues bar. It was a great time in my life. So I really enjoyed it.
Well, I mean, when I went to the university, I didn't get a chance to go away, but a lot of my friends and colleagues did, and they said it's a great way to experience some schooling overseas. You get some of the world culture, so why not reverse that? Obviously, and you guys can come here, and apparently we have a lot of advertising and marketing available. So I love that.
Yeah.
Now, do you feel that that's still the same way to this day, or?
I don't know. I mean, things have changed quite a bit. We've certainly got a lot more advanced in Europe than I think we were when I was at university.
Yeah.
Scale. I mean, it's hard to beat the States for scale. So if you want choice and you want, flexibility and abundance, it's a great place to go and play.
Okay. Well, I mean, so just so you understand, we're on a little like-mindedness here because I have a bachelor's of science in marketing and psychology. So not advertising, but we all play in the same circles. So
sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love the fact that I embedded psychology in. I wasn't expecting it. I ended up adding it in the middle as an adult student going back to school to finish the degree. And it just changed my mindset. I love just digging into how the human brain works, how it attaches, how it connects, and especially how it applies across the board into the advertising sectors and everything else. It's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, I was just having some lunch with some friends yesterday, and their daughter is about to study psychology and fine arts. Interesting combination. Oh. But, we all agree that psychology, it's useful for everyone.
Yeah. I think I will say if I had gone back in time to when I first started going to the university, I was in engineering, which that would have been weird, right? Mixing engineering and psychology. That could have been interesting. But I would have loved to tell myself, hey, why don't you try a minor in that? Because admittedly, I started with a minor in philosophy. That really opened my mind up. But then it just made a metamorphosis, and I went from philosophy to the psychology side. So,
yeah. Well, it's fun stuff to get into. I mean, it never gets boring learning about how this works, right?
Yeah. Well, especially in the speaking circuit. So, right. So how long have you actually been in the speaking circuit? Because you've been on a few stages, sir.
I have. Probably my first big gig was probably about 15 years ago, I guess now.
Wow.
So a while. I've walked the boards, and I love it. I love it. There's nothing quite like working a big audience and creating an energy and seeing the light go on. So I tend to be quite interactive in the stuff I do. I tend to be quite simple and human and hopefully energetic. But it's a fun way of creating some impact and making a living.
Well, I mean, I think the whole piece of the energy and making it interactive is important because, we're human beings. I mean, I would like to see us all interact in a positive way, in a motivational way, in an inspirational way. And actually, for our video followers who follow us on YouTube, I'm actually on your website now and in the speaking section. So talks that engage, motivate, and inspire. So that's exactly the vibe that I want to get out of a speaking experience and what I try and give out in I'll say my speaking career is much younger than yours.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things. You never stop learning about the brain. You never stop learning about speaking. I am constantly inspired, actually, by watching other people, their styles, the way that they engage. And the number of times I go out and I think I'm going to be doing something, and the audience is slightly different. There's just a different vibe going on, and I end up veering in a different direction. And actually nailing content that I've never nailed before, it just kind of comes to me, and that's why I love it, because it's quite a creative mode to be in. I'm not one of these people that does the same stuff in the same way every time. You have to play an experiment, and that's a joy. Sometimes it works brilliantly, and sometimes you learn.
Well, I love your point on this because there's so many people who are newer to speaking. And granted, I mean, I started taking classes on speaking in the university over here, and it opened my mind. And once I got into sales and marketing, and you start doing a lot of B2B, business to business meetings with CEIOs, you eventually get much more comfortable with yourself. Yeah. And I think to your point, I personally value this is that I don't script things too much. Like everybody's like, oh, I want to see a really powerful PowerPoint and a guideline and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, how are you becoming so scripted that you're not reading your audience and you're not adapting to who you're stepping up in front of? You can only get so much before you get there, but I think you kind of have to adapt on the fly, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you have to know your ins and your outs. You have to know your bounce points. But the way you get there and the way that you play with a group, I think is unique every time, because there's never been a moment like right now. And therefore, the best speakers, I think, can read that audience and play it. and surprise themselves. I mean, I often, when working with groups, I'll often co-facilitate. We'll have other people on stage, and you'll come off at the end and you'll do a debrief, and you'll both be quite surprised as to what happened. But usually, because of that, it's actually gone much better than if you just follow the plan. I mean, it's great to have a plan so you get in the right energy, you know what to do, you feel prepared, but the plan was just there to get you there. After that, you've got to freestyle.
I like that. Well, I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why I designed this podcast this way was because I said, well, I told you before we fired the show up today, I said, well, listen, there's no real format. I mean, we talk about some key domains, health, business, lifestyle, because everybody struggles with them. But in the end, I don't want to overscript this, and I don't want to have a boring list of Q&A. And I hope that I'm honoring my guest co-hosts like yourself and not, following that, because sometimes I've had some guests come on like, oh, I had my VA send over our normal Q&A, and I'm like, well, that's nice, but this is my show, and we're going to do things my way.
It's much more fun. It'll be unique. It's not just the same thing rolled out again with a different interviewer. So I don't know why somebody would bother doing that.
Well, and again, the point here is that you're a co-host on this show now. So I want you from a marketing perspective to say, well, you weren't just interviewed, man. Like, no, you got to co-host this show. You got to present to our audience in your own relaxed style. And I think that's part of it too, right? Is if we get too scripted in life, do we not get kind of somewhat restrict ourselves, and we actually hold ourselves back? And I think we're afraid to open up and get free.
Well, I think that is the challenge with leadership, full stop. The difficulty is that when you start to do anything successfully, you start to believe that that's your identity. And you say, well, if it worked before, I'll keep doing it, because it's got me this far. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it's quite hard for senior successful people to actually be creative and actually look at what's going on around them now and answer the most important question, which is what's needed here. And what's needed here right now is not what was needed yesterday, because today is different. So I think flexibility, tuning up to what's going on around you, having some choices and being playful and having some experiments is the key to being good in business and in life.
Now, how long ago did you learn that? Or has this been an ongoing process like throughout life?
I think it's become more conscious as time has gone on. I've largely been an experimenter. I've got an active brain. I like to do strategy and think things through, but I learned really early on that it doesn't matter how good your strategy is, it doesn't matter how good your plan is, you got to try stuff out and learn if it works or not. And actually, the sooner you can do that and get things dirty and get your hands involved, the more visceral the learning. So I learned from an early age to do that. And I've got much better, and I think we all make mistakes with this, but I got much better at listening to that inner voice, the one that actually goes, this isn't quite right, or actually that feels good, let's go there, which isn't intellectual, it's a lot more intuitive.
Now, when you, because obviously part of your bio, you talked about being able to hook up with Apple's co-founder, right? Steve Wozniak, very famous name. If anybody follows anything about Apple, which I'm sorry, it's a worldwide company, you better know something about the guy. Now, real quick though, do you have his that video linked on the Barez-Brown.com site?
There's a clip of me interviewing him. Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you get full rights to that stuff or not. I don't know how that works because it's Leadercast. So, but like when you sat in on that, was he basically vibing on the same type of energy? Was that a lot of, because I find that the more CEOs I struggle, or I struggle to actually understand, but also at the same point, learn to embrace and follow some of their teachings, is that they do pretty much share the same perspective. Like there's a lot of bosses, so to speak, that are afraid to make mistakes. And the sooner, as you said, start getting your hands dirty, that's how you start learning, especially as a team, as an organization.
Yeah. Well, in Steve's particular case, I mean, he is a massive tinkerer. I mean, he's been tinkering with circuit boards since he can remember, and he loves to experiment and play and try things out. So I think he is a classic example of an experimenter, and he's very happy to get things wrong because he is such a learner. He wakes up in the morning to learn and wants everyone else to learn too. So he's big with that. I think across all the organizations I work with, and I work with people from Nike to Unilever to Coke to Diageo, all these different organizations, lots of ad agencies. Some embrace it and some find it's a very integral part of their culture, and some deeply struggle with it. And sometimes it's cultural. sometimes it's about leadership identity. But it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge for people. Ultimately, everyone talks about the fact it's great to get things wrong and learn from it. But ultimately, when you are there and you're responsible and you have to deliver a P&L, people don't want to get things wrong. Even when they're talking about it, deep down, there's a fear attached to it. And therefore, they hedge their bets. They take incremental little bets instead of big ones. And therefore, they can only get a certain amount of performance. And I just think that's kind of implicit in the kind of reward and recognition structure. I think it's the way the business is set up. It's about, how we talk to our investors on a quarterly basis. It makes people smaller.
Well, so I have an interesting angle for you here, or a question to see if I would agree with this or disagree with this. So back in, I think it's 2003, a couple of telecommunications companies here were acquired, rebranded, and I worked my way up through that, being just a guy literally answering a headset in a call center, right? And worked my way up into management. And then they decided to remove the management titles, send all of management down to Tennessee here in the USA to a special consultant. We did it at a big hotel, and we literally re-educated over 2 weeks every level of management in the company, especially the frontline managers, which is what we were. And we were rebranded as coaches, which is good and bad, depending, because you probably will agree, some people are not meant to be coaches.
I think that is for sure. Yeah.
So this organization is known as T-Mobile. So worldwide company, right? Deutsche Telekom, parent company. But this was T-Mobile USA's initiative to try and make an impact in the fact that we had high employee attrition rates, right? There was, an average call center employee we would bring in was 7 weeks of training for a new hire. That's costly. That's costly. So they said, well, we got to make a change. And they said, well, listen, we need to teach you guys how to not just manage people and command people, but to coach, develop, find career paths for these people, help them feel like they belong in the organization, et cetera, et cetera. So I will say to this day, probably one of the most powerful, I guess, internal training experiences that I ever had as a budding, corporate guy before I left the corporate world. But I really enjoyed the experience. But my thing was this: how many companies have the balls to even consider, like, literally stripping titles, rebranding, retraining, and trying to push this across the entire organization? It blew my mind. So,
well, the great news is more and more are doing it now. So
yes.
When I started out in business 20, 30 years ago, I would say it was a lot more conservative. It was a lot more command and control, hierarchical. Job titles were everything, right? Because you fought for that job title, and therefore you wouldn't get rid of it. I would say that leadership has changed dramatically around the globe. It's not all about ego. It's a lot more about creating the conditions for others to do amazing work. And therefore, I think more people are bold, like T-Mobile, who say, do you know what? We're going to throw the old business out the window. We're going to do things quite differently. And quite frankly, if you're not doing that, you ain't going to win, because things are changing so fast. You have to be changing things up in quite dramatic. You can't just tinker around the edges anymore, because you will be lost. The bold leaders, I think, will get rewarded.
I will definitely agree. I will say, out of most of the companies I've ever worked for, even though I ended up leaving probably 5-6 years later, but then again, that's pretty common nowadays, is that and admittedly, I got bored eventually, but the point was, like, out of all the companies, they were definitely trying to be forward thinking. They were doing things, it was crazy. Like, I helped migrate one of the call centers to a new site, and we spent $12 million US just to redesign this site and obviously update it, retrofit it with the latest tech. But they hired an interior designer. They were doing all their company colors fuchsia, and they were going crazy with colors, and they were trying to make, you spend hours upon hours in a call center environment. It can be really boring and stale. So they really tried to liven it up. I'll give them respect for that as a company.
Yeah, me too. You know what? I think, anybody who's got a job and, the leadership are teaching them, treating them, like human beings. And they're thinking, do you know what? We've all got our own energetic state. There are certain things we can do to harness that and actually make people feel better. And we realize if they feel better, that they're happier, they do better work. It's obvious stuff, but, we appreciate it, right? And we'll show up with, a better engagement level, better motivation, and we're going to play a better game. So, it just makes sense.
It definitely does. And so I wanted to tie this kind of into everything else you got going on right now, because
Sure.
my little keywords I'm going to throw out here right now was like, that was, if I look back now, I think that was one of those careers that really started to wake me up in regards to what the hell was I doing? Where was I going to go next? Admittedly, like that company, that career helped me push myself to go back to the university on nights and weekends to finish that degree. Just because I needed that self of achievement. I'm the first person in my family to be, college educated, university, all that. So that was like a big step. And then it also awoke me to realize that, don't tie yourself to one career or one paycheck if that's not what you're happy doing. So I eventually was able to move on and go through a couple more companies. To the point where I literally in 2009, 2010, you probably don't know this because this experience right now for us was set up through a third party, but I don't know if you guys, actually, I don't think you guys have them in the UK. Here, we have very dangerous wildfires out west in California. Yeah. So I did that. So I left the corporate world, took 2 years, served on one of our elite hotshot crews where you pretty much camp under the stars every night. You're out there fighting wildfires for 16 hours a day on the side of a mountain. Life-changing experience for me. Just like all that business development, I got the degree and everything else. And I said, I'm taking a break, and went 2 years and did that when I was 31 and 32. And it's literally helped inspire Live the Fuel. That's why fire's in my logo. It was, it taught me things like understanding what the heck brotherhood was all about and that bond, and how like the regular business jobs just don't have that connection. I never understood that, and I wanted to understand it more. And now I think I can connect a little bit better with fellow fire, police, military. I get it, because like you literally are serving alongside of other men and women, risking your lives. And so that kind of built up that wake up story. The reason why I'm obviously saying these words to our listeners is that you developed a book and an app, and I wanted to catch them up on this in this episode and what's going on there, because tagline on that is you're escaping a life on autopilot. Yeah. And I want to tie that all into me so you understand where I came from and where I'm at.
Yeah, well, you had a big wake up by the sound of it.
A big one.
Yeah, so I mean, the book, Wake Up. The idea behind it, I guess, is that I've been working with all these different corporates all around the world for many years, and I'm trying to make them more creative. That's basically what I've been doing, and it's almost impossible to make them more creative when they wake up in the morning. And the first thing they do is they look at their email while they're lying in bed. And the next time they're conscious, they're back in bed, and the day has happened to them, right? It's gone so fast.
And then they're checking their email before they go to bed.
And, as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the most important things for a leader to be able to do is to step back from the busyness and answer that question, what's needed here? And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be effective. So I needed to work out how to help them do that. And that's really where I came across Wake Up. So I've been working with leaders and boards to help them become more conscious. And what I've realized is that we've got a bit of a battle on our hands. And the battle really comes from the way that our brain works. So we've all had that experience of driving a long distance, arriving at the destination, and not remembering large chunks of the journey. And that happens largely because our conscious brain uses so much energy. It's like a V8 gas guzzling machine. We try and save energy by switching to the subconscious. Now, the subconscious is more fuel efficient. It's more like a Tesla. And the way that it saves energy is very simple. What it does is it looks around and says, have I seen something like this before? And if I have, it looks vaguely familiar, I'm going to assume it's exactly the same as last time. So you get in the car, you go steering wheel, seat, gear stick, road. Hey, this looks familiar. Subconscious takes over. We drive there, saving energy perfectly safely. Great for driving long distances. Great for doing anything repetitive in our lives. The problem is it doesn't just happen when we're doing that. It happens every day we're living our lives, when we go to work, when we sit at our desk, actually when we're with our loved ones. So my belief is if we can break off autopilot just a little bit more regularly and ask that question, what's needed here, we'll make better decisions, we'll align our talents with the opportunities around us, and actually we'll feel happier in the process of doing so.
Well, that just sounds amazing. But to some of our listeners, it's going to be like, okay, that sounds amazing, but where do I start? And obviously I'm guessing that's why you started the app and you did the book last year, because you launched it last year, right? January?
Yeah. Well, actually, it came out in
UK did January.
Yeah, in January last year in the UK. In the States, it came out in September, October.
Awesome. So we're still in big ramp up here. I love this. So yeah, that's anytime you're less than 1 year, I love that period, because that's just, we're getting after it. So good. Our listeners are able to give back. So I love this, because again, to our listeners, I was doing some screen sharing on the video. You go to his website, barez-brown.com, and he's got the book linked right there. Or just go to Amazon. You search for Wake Up. Or you could probably search for Escaping a Life on Autopilot. Thanks to keyword recognition. It's pretty easy nowadays. Now, is the app everywhere? That's obviously, I'm guessing because you got the hang with Steve, you definitely release this on iOS, right?
Of course. It's on iOS. And I also did Android just in case. Yeah.
Because that would have been funny if you found out that you launched an app and you didn't launch it on iOS first. I just think it'd be hilarious.
I'd be in trouble, right? I'd be in trouble.
So, in some of your bio, you mentioned like how to have kick-ass ideas and shine, and there's a lot of great, and obviously your website, you mentioned about motivation, inspiration. So there's a lot of that content built into this too.
It is a lot of the principles of it. So the way that the Wake Up works is it's a series of kind of playful experiments for you to try and see what works for you. And all these experiments are based on my experience of helping companies get more creative. So it will be, certainly the foundations of all those books will be in there. And some of the experiments will help you physically, some mentally, some emotionally, some spiritually. But the idea is that if you try them on and see what works for you, then you will work out a little bit more in an attuned fashion what makes you more conscious. That's the idea of it. But what works for one person will work differently for somebody else. So, it's really quite a playful approach.
I like the playful approach because, so here's a fun connection. You might get a kick out of this. Obviously, we have a lot more space here in the US than maybe the UK. I love to drive. I did, again, I don't know the translation, but I did over 41,000 miles in my car last year. Now, most of that was business, but either way, I get around. So I know the road. And I'm like exactly what you were just talking about is like breaking the programming. Yes, we have the power of satellites and GPS, but when I started driving, because I'm a Gen Xer, we didn't have that. We were excited when something existed called MapQuest.com. I think that still exists, but we used to be able to like plug in the to and from, and you print it out, and you take that with you, and then you look for the turns. So that was the way we got around. And but one thing I learned from my father to this day, and he's an amazing man because he can find his way anywhere without a GPS. He's never used a GPS app in his life, and he drives for a living for his business. So is that I will purposely pick roads that I've never been on, just to see if I can find a new shortcut. And if it's within like 1 to 5 minutes, I don't consider that a delay. I consider that something new to learn. So it's funny because I have colleagues of mine or clients that I've been on business trips with, and like they're bringing out the GPS right away. And I'm like, no, I've been to this state before. I've been to this city before. I've got the highways covered. I'm fine. Once we get closer, I'll let you know, and then you can bring up the GPS. And they just look at me and they're like, are you crazy? And I said, no, seriously, I know the highways.
No, I think that's super cool. So if you think about how autopilot works, autopilot feeds off habits, right? So if you do things that are routine, autopilot goes, great, I'm taking over. Now, what we know is that from the research we did for the book, that around 80% of our life is lived on autopilot, okay? So if you can just bring that down to 78, it makes a difference. 75 would be amazing. So all you need to do is do some things that break habits. So your brain goes, actually, I don't know what's going on here. And by doing so, you become more conscious. So one of the ideas in the book is take a different route to work every day, which is kind of what you're doing when you're making up routes, right? Because your brain has to look from first principles and go, actually, I don't recognize this. So therefore, I need the conscious brain to kick in. So what you're doing there is a classic wake-up example. In fact, there's another one in the book, which is getting lost at lunchtime. So when you have a lunch break, hop on a bus, go for a walk, go somewhere you haven't been before. And again, because your brain doesn't recognize it, it will therefore have to become more conscious. So I think you're living a bit of wake-up already, Scott.
I'm hoping so, because it sounds like it, because you're getting me all fired up right now. Like, do you guys have the Yelp app over there?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So I love the Yelp app. When I travel, I'll just plug in a keyword like espresso or cappuccino, like just fun, like stuff like that. Or if there's something specific kind of food I'm looking for, and I just wait for stuff to show up. And then I look at the reviews. I'm like, never been there before. And I just go there. So when I travel for business, I love it. It's probably one of my most favorite life hack apps that I use. And people are like, everybody uses Yelp. I was like, yeah, but I use Yelp for that strategy is that, yes, I can mark some favorites in there. And it's good to see those come up again. But if I'm looking for something new and exciting, I'm going to try somewhere and experience something different.
It's fun. I mean, it's a kind of, it's a tech randomizer, right? It hooks you into things you wouldn't notice. I used to... I had a big team of trainers working for me. When we used to go and work abroad, we used to do a very simple thing, which is say, right, we need to eat tonight. So why don't we take the third right, the second left, the first restaurant we see? I mean, sometimes you ate in places you didn't want to choose, but it was always a fresh experience. Because otherwise, I think you do that. All the information is accessible now. So you always do the same thing. You look, okay, the nearest thing with the highest ratings, with the price that I can afford. And actually, therefore, you start to end up having a very similar experience regardless of where you go. So if you can randomize it a lot more, you become more conscious and you have a richer life, right?
I definitely agree with that. I tell people that this totally connects to our listeners, guys. I mean, really, really listen to this because he's giving you crazy nuggets of knowledge. And one of the biggest things I can connect on here is why I'm obsessed with networking. And I love getting connected to people because I always get excited about who I can connect them to next, right? And I was joking around the other night with another podcast recording because they're like, oh, well, if you can ever get me connected to anybody, I'm like, no, it's okay. I already figured it out. Like, what do you mean? I was like, well, ever since I passed over 100 episodes, now there's over 140 online now because I release 2 a week. And I was like, now I could just tap into that database alone. Just the podcasting co-host circle of influence and get fellow co-hosts connected. But I obviously have other circles of influence. You and I are both on LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn since it was founded. And we know the power of that.
Sure. It's huge. It's huge. At the moment, we have never been in a more networked, accessible, connected world or moment than like right now. I mean, if there's somebody you need to meet, you can meet them. There is that possibility so much easier than ever before. And I think one of the things I'm really passionate about is part of the human psyche is that we're all alone. We have to work hard and you only get rewards if you take it all seriously. And none of that is true. The more playful you become, the more interesting life becomes. We are more connected with more help and more collaborators out there than ever before. And actually, the more we can hook into them in a fun, energetic, and human way, the more this world spins better. So yeah, I mean, let's get out there and make some friends. God, there's amazing people on this planet we've never met.
You and I haven't met to connect, man, because I'm geeking out right now how I used to criticize myself over the years because I always had multiple jobs. Yeah. And it wasn't, the jobs were not because of the money. I'm not saying I didn't always make great money, but the point was that I had side jobs. I'm a cycling nut. So I was a spinning instructor. I've been a USSA ski race coach for 11 years. I'm currently a CFL1 CrossFit certified coach. And when I get bored, I just go and learn something and pick up a certification. And then if I love it, I'll end up doing it for a while. And I don't consider those things jobs, right? Those were things because I have the time, I have the freedom, and I love that sport, or I love that new form of fitness. I want to figure it out. I want to learn about it. And then the beauty is you end up building more circles of influence and you get to meet people in a different way. And it totally comes back to why I'm so obsessed about teaching people about health, fitness, business, lifestyle balance, because these are all things that you're discussing right now is like, get outside of the norm, man, like break the habits. Even though we do teach there's power in habit. I wanted to bring that up, right? Like you have to agree that there's a lot of gurus out there teaching the power of the 21 days, right? 21 days builds a habit psychologically for most people. But what you're saying is don't become so habitual that it restricts your life.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's all, if you think about the conscious and the subconscious, sometimes people say, it's all about access to your subconscious. It's the creative genius. It's the answer to everything. Well, it's not if you're not conscious enough, truth be told. And then people go, it's all about consciousness. Well, it's exhausting if you're conscious all the time. So you need, it's all about the balance. And it's the same with habits, right? It's the same with habits. We could not live our lives without frying without habits, right? We need those to preserve energy and to be efficient. The question is, number one, are they good habits, right, versus bad ones? And number two, are you aware enough of them so that you can change them up if they become too mundane and actually start to take over too much? Because the problem is with autopilot is obviously when the subconscious is running the show, if it has to make a decision between something new and something old, it will always choose old, right? So over time, autopilot builds and grows, so it gets to this 80%. When we're young, it's less, and obviously it develops over time, the more habituated and routine we get. So, you can understand that why before long it can actually just take over everything. So it's just about being able to prune it back a bit and say, actually, do you know what? I just want a little bit more consciousness, a little bit more awareness so that I can lead a more extraordinary life. And it's the balance. It's always the balance.
Well, so do you find that was something you actually were able to take away from your earlier career choice of spending some time in the Army? Because I do feel that now that I took that fire adventure a few years back, like that really helped, I guess, solidified things now for me years later is that, they program you for a reason, is to keep you and your fellow personnel safe. There's certain protocols you got to follow because in the end, shit will hit the fan. So you do got to be able to rely on some of those habits to keep yourself safe and alive.
Oh my God, I had, when I was in the Army, I hadn't studied any psychology, right? So I had no idea as to why they were doing what they're doing. When I look at it now, it's amazingly effective, right? I mean, all that marching around on the square is so that you can take subconscious messages and instructions and you don't think about them, you just do them instinctively. Right. It's all there for that reason. You do all that rubbish stuff and they give you a little reward and it's all they know exactly what they're doing so that actually you keep doing the rubbish stuff to get the reward.
But didn't they use psychology to build that anyway?
Do you know, I don't know how much psychological study was done in the basics, but what they were doing was as good as the psychology of today, I would say. So it's definitely got brilliant foundations. My guess is the Army isn't stupid, and they've been studying it probably harder than we have, So, but it's incredibly effective. It works brilliantly. So I think having certain habitual patterns to make sure you perform to a particular level is brilliant for lots of things we do. And actually, if you're playing sport, you don't want to think about your forehand. It needs to be instinctive. It needs to be absolutely drilled in. And I'd say that's the same for lots of areas of our life. I don't want to think about how I drive a car. I do want to think about, am I using my talents in the right way today with this unique circumstances happening? That's what I want to be able to think about.
Well, I mean, look at all the Olympians, right? These are some of our most peak athletes around the world. Every country's got them. And to your point, right? They needed to build repetition and habit to build success. The right habits, obviously, the right habits.
Absolutely.
And then when crap hits the fan, which, like, for example, you ever watch a downhill ski race course? I mean, somebody's blowing out of a race gate and they're up on one ski because their weight shifted or something happened or they hit an icy patch. When you see those athletes able to recover when you think they're going to wreck, it's powerful. It's like, whoa, how did they save that turn? But that's part of that balance you're talking about.
Yeah. It's the power of the repetition, yeah. So, no, I'm a huge fan of habits in the right way. And actually, certain habits can free us, right? So one of the things that inspired me on this book, so I was at a friend of mine's wedding, and he's got this business called Finisterre, and they make cold water surf gear, which is handy because our water is always cold. Right?
And you're a bit of a paddleboard fan.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a good friend to have. So I was at his wedding, and he had this guy working for him, Ernie, who is exceptional. Sometimes there are these people that walk in a room and their eyes just light up, and they can impact everyone in their positivity, and people just want to be around them. So I was like, look, Ernie, what's your secret? How come you've got this amazing energy? And he had a glass of champagne in his hand, and we were starting to relax. He said, I've got one thing I do, but it's a bit weird, Chris. And I'm going, bring it on. I love the weird. And he said, well, every time I have to go to the bathroom, I do 20 press-ups. And I'm going, okay, Ernie, that is weird, my friend. You are on the scale.
Where?
Well, that's the thing. He said, it's not the place, it's the time. Okay, so I don't do it in the bathroom.
I would hope so.
Exactly. But what he does is he's made this positive habit. which is, every hour or so, he knows that he will, do some press ups. He'll get the blood flowing around his body. He'll get more oxygen into his brain, which makes him conscious so that actually he can step back and say, what's needed here? Am I doing the right stuff right now? So I see that as a positive habit that helps him become conscious, helps him break off autopilot. And if you see the guy, he is ripped and he never goes to the gym.
I'm loving this story because I have a exact variation of this for being a safe driver. When we were firefighting, we would travel because we were as hot shots. It's one of the elite crews. Like you're either a smoke jumper or you're a hot shot in the U.S. wildland firefighting world. So smoke jumpers, they skydive in, but that's a very unique crew. And then the hot shots, we hike up. Like we're trained to be survive out there if they have to, camp, etc. Anyway, when you're driving from like state to state, because we have a big country, and you're deployed to a fire in Montana, but you're based out of Arizona, like we were, you got a bit of a road trip. And so to keep the guys fresh, like we're sitting in these crew carriers for miles and on end and hours on days. So every time we got to a gas station, they would make us get out and either do burpees or push-ups or press-ups, as you're calling them, or something to get the blood pumping, right? Get the energy going. And I've never forgotten that. So when I was on, I would do cross-country road trips, and sometimes I would try and push the envelope a little too much. And then I've never forgotten that. I'm like, if I'm getting tired and you're on that autopilot, just driving, staring at the roads, you pull over and give yourself 20, 25 push-ups, man, and that blood gets pumping.
I had a good friend of mine, Drew, at Iowa State, and actually he was a psychology major. And what I love about the States is when you're filling up your car with gas, you can put it on. You just put it on and set it and leave it, right? Whereas in the UK, you have to hold it.
Oh, okay.
So he'd always set it and leave it, and then he would do push-ups while it was filling up every time. And I've seen him doing that in the snow, in -10. He did it religiously. So I've just realized this is a United States thing. I love it.
Or we're either a little bit crazy or we just really like to balance our lives a little bit. I don't know about it. We're definitely not perfect in a lot of things, but I think it's one thing that if I had to take that as a win, we'll take that one as a win. So we have enough other things not working to our advantage. But I mean, in the end, that's what we're talking about, right? Like brain, right? Blood flow. If it gets the heart pumping, it's pushing the blood, man. That's what our brain wants. If that gets you more awake and more alert, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There's another hack for you. If you're feeling, sluggish and tired, your energy's down, or you're not alert, why don't you think about that? Like step outside of your office, or if you got an office, or if you're in a cubicle with a headset on like I was years ago, make sure the cord's long enough, drop and give yourself push-ups. Because when I got bored in the call centers, I used to give myself air squats. I would just sit there and just go up and down. People thought I was crazy. I'm the fit guy, but I was staying fit.
It's a huge difference. There was a study done at MIT a few years ago around creativity. And, when we're walking at our natural gait, especially outside, it spikes our creativity by up to 60%.
Wow.
So, whenever I'm working with my clients, we don't do brainstorms inside with flip charts. We go out, we walk and we talk and we make it an energetic, fun thing. And, you don't need clever creative techniques. That is enough to bring out your genius. And I love it. I mean, if you had a choice, you want to stay in a little sweaty room with some air conditioning and no light, or you want to go out with a buddy and have a chat as you walk, what are you going to choose, right?
I agree. And actually, because it's so cold here the past 2 weeks, I made my client actually get out of our office. We got in our car and we went out to, there's a high-end grocery store here called Whole Foods in this country. They just got bought by Amazon. So I was like, hey, they've got a great coffee cafe. If you're hungry, you can grab a snack. Let's go and just finish this meeting off site. We just need to move. We'd already been there for like 2 hours, taking mini breaks. But I'm like, nah, we got to keep the strategy session going. Let's freshen things up. Let's change the location. And I love doing that because we have the technology nowadays. I mean, you can go to a Starbucks and use free Wi-Fi, or any coffee shop. That's the other thing I'd use my Yelp for. I don't always go to Starbucks. I just Google Wi-Fi on Yelp, or I search for again, that's why I'm a big coffee shop fan. So I know you guys love your tea over there, but
well, but to that end, I used to work for this innovation company, and we're a little startup called What If. It's become incredibly successful. But when we started off, we didn't have enough office space. There were like 4 of us sharing a desk. So we all used to go out and we'd work in different cafes. And it's number one, it's the cheapest office space you'll get, 2 cups of coffee for a whole morning.
Nice.
But the second thing is you tend to choose the space that fits the work you're doing. So there was like these Russian tea rooms with these amazing green plants. They played opera in the background, and it fitted a particular type of thinking, And then there were other places that played a bit of grunge, and it was all about hardcore coffee, and that kind of fitted a different type of energy. So I think that the environment around you is the biggest impact on your creativity, because it's stimulus, but also on your state and how you feel. So if you can play some tunes on that, I think it makes a huge impact.
I definitely agree with that. There's definitely been meetings where we were actually productive over lunch, but there's other meetings where I would not do it over lunch, for example, right? Doing it during a meal, there might be too much distraction. But if you want it more relaxed and casual, and you just want to have everybody have the freedom to just throw ideas out there, and then we literally did that 2 weeks ago, actually. We had a business lunch, same client, mind you. I had her bring her team. We had a lunch. And then right next door was a Starbucks. So I was like, hey, let's go next door, and whatever's stuck in your heads that really stood out, let's write it all down, and then let's start building a game plan on it. It was a really productive afternoon. But you're right, though. It depends on the environment you're in.
It does. I mean, we used to every now and again, I don't know if you ever have to go to many board meetings where you've got to go through agendas and all that, but my God, it hurts me.
Luckily, I do not, but that sounds awful.
It's not my way of processing. So it's not really what I enjoy too much. But what we used to do to make it a bit more fun is we jump on a train in London and we go to Scotland, and we would do the board meeting on the train. And of course, you got all this landscape flying by that's different all the time. You've got this different stimulus. You've still got Wi-Fi. And then, you can have a night in Edinburgh, come back and do a different meeting. And it was a great way of doing work. I loved it.
That sounds interesting. I never thought about it that way either, man. But I will say, I have to agree with you. I've more times than not, I know of on Tim Ferriss, he's viral online around the world nowadays too, his podcast, other shows out there. I keep hearing unique members of leadership people all talking about the walking meeting. As you already said, hey, get outside, go for a walk. It can be very productive. It can be very developmental. So, and again, you speak about leadership. So I think we can trust that, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I think he might know what he's talking about. And actually, real quick, I'm going to do some screen sharing again because I have your social medias up. So I love the fact that you actually exist all over the place. I do believe in growing your brand, but also growing your name as a brand too. So I noticed that on Twitter and Instagram, you exist in both ways. You have Upping Your Elvis, the creative leadership. But then you also have your personal profile as well. Was that just a choice, or was that recommended? What was your reasoning behind that?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a choice. But basically, we got two pretty different groups that are interested. Number one, there's the business group, and these tend to be organisations that want to engage with us, or are into creativity and leadership. But then also as an author, I've got quite a few people that are consumers, and they're just very interested in personal development. So we split them out very deliberately for that reason, and I think it therefore plays better to those segments. And they actually cross-fertilise brilliantly. So actually, my author website actually is the biggest referrer to my corporate one. So they work nicely together.
I like that. Well, you got me thinking, because I actually have double profiles, but I've only been pumping content to live the fuel. But I have my personal name locked. I always tell people this: when you lock down your brand, lock down your name as well. So own the real estate. I was like, listen, even if you're not going to use it right away, buy the .com in your name, lock it down on all the social media. And then when things make sense, and this is actually one of my things I've been thinking about for 2018, was I thought about actually splitting some of my content up and just doing dual profiles. So you've got me thinking. I'll have to study you now.
Yeah, I mean, it's all getting into play, right? We don't do it perfectly, but if they're feeding each other nicely, it could be good.
I like it. Well, and real quick, I wanted to bring this woman up to you. Are you familiar with the New York Times bestseller, Mel Robbins?
I know of her.
Okay. Yeah. She wrote the 5-second rule.
Yeah.
She totally coincides with what you've been talking about towards the end of the show here. And I wanted to bring her up just before, and I'll give you a proper goodbye when we end the show too, because I know we're coming to the end of our time, but only because when you brought up how breaking the habits, that's kind of what she talks about in her book, is like, give yourself, that 5 seconds. And that's what the brain needs to break that instantaneous decision, like, hey, give yourself 5 seconds. If it still makes sense, then fine, go ahead. But more often than not, you're breaking through the habitual decision-making process.
Yeah. If you give yourself 5 seconds, then I guess what you also do is you go away from autopilot into being conscious.
That's what she's hinting at. Yes. Yeah.
Do I want to actually do this?
I would love to see you two in like a healthy debate about this stuff, or just sharing best practices, because I think you guys would vibe really well.
I think we could be riff.
Yeah, because now I got to read your book. I didn't get a chance to get to your book yet, and then I got to get to. I've already read her book, so it's just that's the only problem. When your podcast starts taking off, then it's like, oh my god, I got books coming in all over the place. So I'm trying to review stuff. So I did a short overview of your book, and I'm like, this is great. You're approved. Send him my way. But I didn't get through the whole thing yet. So
if you're doing 2 a week, you've got a reading list.
Well, luckily I'm not doing 2 authors a week. That would just. I mean, I'm already crushing Audible. I'm using that's my hack. Oh, is this on Audible?
Is this on Audible? Well, I've done an audio version.
You do? Okay.
I'm hoping it's on.
Because I destroy audio content. I can't sit down and physically read anymore. I'm like, when I travel so much, I'm like, boom, audio and podcast, man. That's where it's at.
Yeah, my wife is the same. In Costa Rica, she nailed her books. Headphones in, here we go. Yeah.
There we go. I love it. Well, listen, we're getting to the end of our time. I'm going to respect your time. I want to thank you for coming on today, but I also wanted to honor you because our podcast's co-hosts, I like to have them have the final words of the show. And since we're not scripted and we're off the cuff, this is your chance to kind of close the show out and say, great, if they forget all this other wonderful content you shared today, what should they remember about Chris? What's your message and what are you trying to do in this world, man? Like, what's your final words to close this out?
Yeah, so for me, what the big message that I would like to get over is this life is extraordinary. You know, we have opportunities beyond belief right now. And if we only just got to understand that actually we get caught in these traps just to save energy, and there were some simple things that we could do to help us join up the dots so that every day we can shine more brightly, we can meet more amazing people and have more fun while we're doing it, then that is what Wake Up is all about, and that's what my life's about.
I love it. Well said, sir. Well, listen, hang tight. I want to give you a proper goodbye off the air. To the listeners, that's Chris Barez-Brown, ladies and gentlemen. Go check out his site. Get the book. Heck, get the app if you're tech savvy. I'm going to download the app today because I already have the book. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, check out Wake Up, Escaping a Life on Autopilot. All right. Again, go back to Barez-Brown.com. Again, I'll have all this stuff linked in the blog content. I always do, ladies and gentlemen. But thank you again for tuning in to another powerful Live the Fuel podcast episode. Again, this is what we're talking about, guys. We're here to talk about health, business, and lifestyle. So as I always say, keep living the fired up, epic life. And we'll talk to you guys again soon. You're clear of the pod. The video I just leave on for extra content. So
Sweet. Are you happy?
I am. Are you?
You know, I enjoyed it. You got a lovely bounce about you, Scott.
Yeah, I'm all over the place.
It's good. I like the energy a lot.
I don't like to have a boring story, and I don't want to. I want to honor the I tell everybody, I'm like, listen, if you're not energized, I got to at least exude a little bit, because then we could feed off of it, and then maybe I can bring people up a little bit. So,
yeah, well, you know, if that doesn't bring them up, nothing will.
No, but you're already a pretty good energized guy, man. I love the paddleboarding too. So, do you paddleboard on the Sound?
Sorry?
Do you paddleboard out there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Ooh, you definitely have the cold. You definitely have the cold water suits.
Yeah, you need those. The problem is when you're paddling, you overheat. That's the problem. So you need the suit for the cold, and then you overheat. So it's at the moment it's not quite right. I need to go to one thinner suit really to enjoy it. So about March.
They haven't developed that technology about keeping the right amount of heat in and releasing the right amount of heat with the waterproofing. It doesn't work.
Not yet. It's going to come.
It's got to, man. It's got to be. I guarantee it's probably something with nanotechnology or something. Who knows? It'll
be knocking on our doors before we know it. You know that, Scott.
Exactly. Well, listen, I've got all your content. Whoever set this up, I don't know who booked it for you, but it doesn't matter. But obviously I have all your links because I was able to share everything today. Is there anything else that you needed me to include in your content? Do you feel that I might have been missing?
I don't think so. I loved it. I mean, it was nice to just do something completely unstructured and go with the flow. I think we got all the major points in there. I've enjoyed it. So thank you very much. If there's anything else you need from us, just let us know, yeah?
No, absolutely. I can't wait to share your content. We're usually about 2 weeks out, so I try and keep things as fresh as possible. I don't want to overbook people, and then they're not showing up for like 2 months from now. I like to keep things fresh and current. So, but I will definitely be notifying you guys via email when everything goes live. So, and that way, hey, you guys can start cross-sharing and adding it to your media. So,
all right, mate. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well, sir. Take care.
Take care.